Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Kathy Fogel. I work at the California Public Utilities Commission, and we're going to get going here today because we're going to have lots to talk about and some fabulous presenters. And I'm just going to take a moderator's prerogative and show just a couple slides to get us warmed up here. So California has had zero net energy goals since 2007, I guess, and the goals are up on the screen there. Hopefully they're all familiar to you. The goals are aspirational goals. So for residential, the goal is that all new homes will be zero net energy buildings by 2020. And for commercial, the goal is that all new commercial buildings will be zero net energy buildings by 2030, with half of existing commercial buildings retrofit to be zero net energy by 2030 as well. So that latter one in particular is a very, very aspirational goal. But the Energy Commission is pursuing going after these goals through Title 24 Building Code. But they are aspirational goals because they'll only be able to do that if that is found to be cost effective under Title 24 rules. So that's a little background there. And then also in 2012, the governor's office issued an executive order, B1812, I think it is, that called for ZNE targets for existing and new state buildings as well. So you can see they're very, very aggressive. And I've just put together a couple of things. At the PUC, we've adopted a strategic plan that included these ZNE goals back in 2008. And since then, there's been various efforts to keep those going. We're doing a lot of action plans. So you may have heard of a local government action plan. And these are just some examples of ways: community leadership, leading by examples. I mean, this is really vague kind of terms. So these are the kinds of ideas that are going into a draft local government action plan that's being developed right now, being led by Joseph Oldham. So you'll be hearing more about that. So I don't want to go through all of these because we want to get to our speakers, but I also wanted to mention that we have worked on a zero net energy residential action plan. It's been a long time in the making, and it's making its way through the final review process now at the Energy Commission and the PUC, and we do hope to complete that soon. And we do have this website up as a resource if you're interested in residential homes, homes and what's going on in that space. And the utilities are launching a pretty innovative new residential new construction incentive design as of July 1st this year to go along with the code. So if you're interested in learning more about that, why don't you go ahead and talk to me later. So hopefully we're all now kind of here. Oops, I need to take this down. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists. Today we've got a fabulous lineup here. First, we're going to hear from Dave Hewitt. So Dave is a Director of Strategic Partnerships at the New Building Institute, NBI. He brings to NBI an exceptional mix of leadership, strategic planning, and business development skills. Dave has served as the organization's Executive Director from 2005 to 2013, playing a role in growing that institution, and has now recently transitioned to part-time status. So Dave's up first. Next, we've got the combo of Neil DeSnew and Gerard Lee, both from Berkeley. Neil manages Berkeley's Energy and Sustainable Development Division in the Planning and Development Department, where he's been since 1994. And this department is responsible for providing strategic direction to the city's sustainability efforts and manages a lot of climate change and clean energy and green building programs. And Gerard Lee is an associate and senior project architect and manager with Harley Ellis Devereaux in their Oakland office. And Gerard is the project architect tasked with bringing the Zero Net Energy West Berkeley project to a successful completion. He's got over 20 years of experience with an emphasis on sustainable design. He's been LEED accredited and just has done a whole host of other things here that I can't read out. It would take way, way too long. So a lot of experience he's bringing to this project. And finally, Chip Fox is with San Diego Gas and Electric for 30 years. Chip has a broad range of experience holding positions in the distribution engineering, customer service, regulatory, and new construction efficiency groups at SDG&E. Currently, he's a manager of residential energy efficiency programs, codes and standards advocacy, and is the Z&E lead for San Diego Gas and Electric. And I've had the pleasure of working with Chip for a number of years, so I can tell you he's got also some great things to say to us. So with that, I'm going to invite Dave up and get his presentation up and enjoy our time here.
It's a pleasure to be here today. I'll put one more thing on the resume, and that is I used to work for local government. So I was the energy director for the city of Portland for about 3 years. My main claim to fame there, for those of you that know what's going on in the city of Portland, is that I hired Sue Anderson, who is now the director of planning and sustainability for the city of Portland. So she's taken what was an energy agenda and managed to move that into a much broader agenda very effectively. So I'm going to talk about just local government buildings primarily, but I'll also talk about other kinds of policies and things that you can do to encourage net zero energy buildings. So first, just a little bit on who's NBI. As in an earlier session where I think I was the only person from out of state, so I'm actually from Washington State. But we're a nonprofit. We work across North America, and we kind of focus on what we call the what's next. We look at small and mid-sized commercial buildings, things up to the size of like an elementary school or a grocery store, and we publish repeatable technical guidance. If you get into bigger, more complex buildings like we're in here, you need the full design team. You've got a lot more options in terms of energy efficiency. If you're doing something that's a simpler kind of building, we do things that are somewhat prescriptive. One of the things that happens with what we do is that it gets built into the international energy efficiency codes, and we also work a little bit with California on building codes. So we work on codes, we work on this design guidance, work on operational interests of existing buildings, optimal operation of existing buildings. And just in terms of what we've done with Z&E, we've been involved in Z&E for about 6 years. We've got staff that are on the board of USGBC. The guy that took over my job as executive director was the first chair of the board of the International Living Futures Institute. That's the Living Buildings Challenge. For those that are familiar, it's net zero energy, net zero water, net zero waste. It's like really aspirational stuff and having tremendous success. I do work for Kathy, working on doing the big, bold 2030 goals for commercial buildings. And I also work and support the National Association of State Energy Officials. Met with them the last 2 days, all the ones from the western side of the country, from Kansas through Guam, basically. Just met with them the last 2 days in Sacramento, trying to get the Z&E agenda going there as well. So a key piece of background here is that one of the pieces we did was begin looking at what is the market status of Z&E buildings, because nobody really knew. We knew that some of these things were popping up. We didn't know how many of them. So we took our first look in 2012, and this is a joint project we did with the National Association of State Energy Officials, took a look at what was going on. And some of the things that are just to get the basics in here for you is that when we're talking about Z&E buildings, if NBI says something's a Z&E building, we have their energy bills, or else they've been certified as Z&E by the Living Building Challenge. Basically, that's the standard that we use. And what we're talking about for Z&E buildings, for those of you that aren't familiar, in general, Z&E buildings are considered to be buildings that we have a year of data that indicates that they're producing as much renewable energy on site as they're using. So they are net zero. In reality, they're never net zero. As a designer, you would never want to take a chance of being 1 kilowatt hour short with your PV arrays. So they're all net positives, if you've heard that terminology. But really important for us is tracking these Z&E emerging buildings. These are buildings that say their goal is to get to Z&E, but they're either under construction or they haven't been occupied for a year, or in a few cases they won't share their energy data with us, which probably means they haven't met their target. But this is really important because this is sort of the leading edge of these. From our perspective, and I think this is beginning to be more and more broadly shared, while it's elegant to produce your energy on site, that's not the only way to go. And so equally important to us is what we would just call ultra-low energy buildings that have about that same level of energy performance. So, a building that uses maybe a third of the energy of a standard building in the U.S. or lower. For those of you that are more technical, these buildings in general would be below 30 kilobTUs a square foot, and you can vary that by climate and building design a little bit. But you can get the renewables somewhere else. So you can get the renewables from a community scale project, and we're seeing more and more of those things, or especially work on like university campuses and Army bases, but we're seeing, Fort Collins, Colorado, which is not an Army base, doing zero net energy, and we're seeing this crop up in other communities around. Or you can just get it off the grid. You can get your renewables off the grid. And sometimes those options are going to be cheaper, or, do we want to cut down all the trees so we can get renewable energy, or what are we going to do with high-rise buildings? It's very difficult to get the PV on those. We think this is equally important to track these things. We just redid this study, and as you can see, before we had just under 100 buildings, and now we're up around 200 buildings. So this thing has doubled in 2 years across the country. A lot of these are in this emerging category. So we're seeing a real growth. And in many ways, this parallels, for those of you that have worked in green building at all, this parallels the initial early year growth of the U.S. Green Building Council and their lead rating system, where we're seeing these things move ahead. We've got a wide variety of buildings that are showing up. So small and medium commercial offices, and not just commercial offices. I mean, this is a big need for local governments too. I mean, a lot of what you're doing is smaller office buildings. K through 12 schools are coming on strong. In combination with universities, about half the projects now are educational related. Larger office facilities, this is the NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, but more locally here in California, SMUD, municipal utility there, has just built their East Campus complex, I believe they call it. Environmental centers, it's great for environmental centers. They should absolutely go net zero energy, but they're a boutique market. I mean, there's not that many of them, and they're not occupied all the time. So we'd much rather see a school or a small office building. And then we're seeing a fair amount of government offices and higher education facilities. And these projects are all over the country. At this point in time, I met with Alabama a couple of weeks ago, and they now have a net zero energy projects. We're in 38 states. California is the leader by far, but the good news is for the rest of the country, there's a number of states that are chasing pretty hard, that are getting more substantial number of buildings built. So I just want to go over a few insights from our study in our most recent 2012. And one of the real benefits about Z&E that a lot of people like, it is truly a clear and aspirational target. This is as high as you can really shoot for, and it's very clear. It's very, it's like you need to produce energy on site that matches your needs. And so a lot of people like that. It gives us a real target. One of the things we get trapped in energy efficiency, having been involved in this field for so long, we get trapped in short-term economics. And if you're trapped in short-term economics, you're not solving carbon problems. So if you're trying to think a little bit differently about how we change how we're viewing these things and relate it to some other goals, Z&E, I think, should be one of those things. The district work and community is coming on strong. Everybody's going for deep energy efficiency first. I shouldn't say everybody. We have a couple of exceptions to that. But, PV costs are coming down. So this economic equation could change as we move forward. It's pretty difficult to hit Z&E. When I was working on commercial buildings, even just 6 or 8 years ago, this was pretty much not on the table as a real way to build buildings. That has changed a lot. Part of the things we've had to change are to be much more comprehensive in how we approach the building. And another thing we've had to change is you really have to watch operations and maintenance and occupancy factors. Some of the top Z&E buildings, most of them, only half of the energy use is so-called regulated energy you can hit with building codes. The Bullitt Center in Seattle, which is one of the premier environmental buildings in the country, 25% of the building energy is consumed by computers and printers in that building, and only 3% is for heating, and like 2% is for cooling. So it's not. We're getting into where you really have to pay attention to these quote plug loads or unregulated loads. We're beginning to see schools, banks, office buildings more routinely. We're beginning to see bigger projects. There's several 300,000 square foot projects now that are out there. And a lot of Z&E, sort of as mentioned, it happens downstream of design. So we need to figure out ways of transitioning buildings from design into operations. So leading list on some of this stuff is how much does Z&E cost anyway? And I'm going to try and feed you a little bit of information on this topic. The first thing that's probably good to know is that this study on the technical feasibility of buildings in California, which was jointly funded by the utilities and conducted by ARUP, we were a minor partner in this, found that basically Z&E is technically feasible for almost all of California's new construction market by the year 2020. So this study is out there. You'll have this, you have this already, I guess, on your little drive, and you can look across to this study if you want to and track this one down. When we get into the economics, here's some new information that's just been released. And this is from Lisa Mathiasen and Peter Morris and Laura, who I don't know, Lesnewski. But they have looked at this in green buildings in the past, and they got some data, and we got some data. And I'm going to show two of those sets of data here. So what's interesting is that net zero energy buildings, or buildings that meet the living building challenge, are the really dark green buildings. And not surprisingly, just to interpret this graph, every bar represents a building, and then these horizontal lines represent, $100 a square foot, $200 a square foot, 300. So you see, as most people would expect, we've got a couple of very expensive, buildings that were built to living building or net zero energy. But you see, somewhat unexpectedly, that we've got some green buildings that are dark green buildings that are right down here in the average cost of construction. And what we've found so far, it's hard to look at a couple hundred buildings and say you have a strong data set. You have a lot of stories is what you have. But we've found that there are a group of buildings that get built for the standard cost of construction, and there are a group of buildings that get built between 12 and 15%, maybe 10 to 15% additional cost. So this thing is not fixed. Another building that they tracked information on that might be of interest to local governments is community centers. And again, we've got one of our buildings hanging out here with the big expensive boys. But you don't always know what's gone on in these buildings, right? You don't know what kind of facilities they're putting in there, what kind of electronics, that sort of stuff. But you see some other dark green buildings that are right there at kind of the normal cost of construction. So these things, it's not like I can predict the cost of construction for any building you might want to take on. What I can tell you is that if you make net zero energy a priority in your cost of construction, there's a lot of opportunities to trade things off in commercial buildings. Just to mention one, a lot of commercial buildings, you see a lot of glass on offices. If you actually replace the glass with an insulated wall, the building costs less and it performs better. So some of these things are very simple. And just orienting the building right and all those sorts of things are really important. So these are all good things to take a look at. And PV is just going down. So this is something, while it's affecting the general PV market, and I won't get into this, but this is also important for net zero energy, is that we're changing the economics of these things as we move ahead. We have just completed, in conjunction with a couple of key partners, again, the International Living Future Institute and Skanska, which is a major contractor, developer, a study for the District of Columbia. District of Columbia was asked the question, what are we going to do here at the center of the U.S. government to do our future construction? Can we move to net zero and living building challenge there? So you can see the numbers. There's a premium for energy efficiency, premium for net zero, but the return on investment for net zero was 30%. Excuse me on that one. So this is a really good investment. I mean, if you're looking at short-term economics, that's less than a 4-year simple payback for those of you that are worth that. So this kind of stuff can really work out and can be very positive for you. I see I'm missing a slide. I tried to replace this slide, but it's my fault. I had a slide that blew up because there were too many graphics. This is a standard. This building was built in Iowa, and the state of Iowa put a little thing on it and said, this is every building. Because it's a 2-story sort of concrete tilt-up structure that looks just like so many other buildings you've ever seen in your life built. But it's zero net energy. It's very low energy. It's not zero net energy, excuse me. They've got some renewables, but not all renewables. So this is an extremely efficient building that will put some renewables on there. But you can see this is actually a hearing room that's a daylit hearing room. How many hearing rooms have you seen that are daylit and that have good control on the daylighting so you don't get too much daylighting penetration in it? So it's good for reducing lighting use, and then you can also reduce the cooling use just from these sorts of strategies. This one I'm going to go through just a little bit because I think it's a great story. And this is a building in a small town in Washington State out on one of our islands or peninsulas out there. And it's an old Sears building. And this is what it looked like. And this is one of the main drags coming into this town of I think it's about 10,000, 20,000 people. And this is what this building looked like for 20 to 30 years. So it was sitting there. And a local architecture firm decided that instead of building themselves a new office, they'd come in and take this thing on. And they weren't dissuaded when they walked into the building and saw the state of repair that you get to. But I'm mentioning this because as we've gone, just coming out of the recession, lots of times there's a lot of buildings out there. There might be a strip mall you know, it can be a lot of different kinds of things, but we've seen some interesting net zero energy buildings built in strip malls. The buildings you mentioned, DNR is in a standard suburban-looking one-story office park kind of thing. We see those kinds of things go on. So this one I just want to take to the extreme. So here's what it used to look like, and here's what it was restored to. And the economics on this thing were incredible, because you can get some of these buildings. They paid $50 a square foot for this building with the site, and they put $80 a square foot. So they built in essence a brand new building for $130 a square foot. You saw those other buildings going from $200 up to $1,000, $130 on this thing. And the daylighting was, this building had some natural daylighting. A lot of buildings have some natural daylighting if you can exploit it. And what we needed in our big pavilion over there, we needed these big-ass fans, right? and big-ass fans is actually a brand name. And you'd think people would be quiet about big-ass fans, and you will read these things where it says, the heating costs, 5% a year, the lighting costs this. The big-ass fan, costs 0.5% of our energy to run. So these things are well-known, but they're designed to serve giant spaces, and they work pretty cool. And this sort of brings it back to, the definition of community. So you take something that looks like that building did that has been unoccupied for 30 years, and then you bring it back, and it becomes a center of your community. And so while this is an architect's office, it now sort of serves multiple functions. But this could be any kind of office space, and this could be an office you could have. So that's my presentation, I think, in a nutshell. We have a ton of information for you. And one of the things we have is we've looked at 9 different policies. I think I included 8 of them here that you can look at to advance net zero energy within your communities. A codes roadmap, so a lot of people, stretch codes and California Green, all that kind of stuff. Benchmarking, I think I've heard a lot about that. If you've got a muni utility, then rate policies can be really important. And as you should be aware, there's some major fights around the country these days on net energy metering. And utility programs, I don't have to tell you about that. There can be incentive programs and savings by design that we'll hear about from CHIP is certainly one of those, but those are different options. There can be different kinds of tax incentives or other kinds of incentives that can be available within local government, density bonus, fast permitting, or some sort of local taxing district. Z&E goals for public buildings. It's part of, I know I can't pronounce the goal setting you guys had, but government buildings should help lead. Local government buildings should help lead. You guys are probably going to own this building for 50 years. So what the heck? I could show you some pretty good near-term economics, but you're going to own this thing for a long time. And it's an example. Before you start talking about codes, you got to walk the walk. And then target markets. And schools is my favorite target market, but you can also do like redevelopment districts and use community scale renewables, a lot of other things to think about, because the commercial sector is built into, there's universities, there's schools, there's commercial real estate, there's corporate real estate, there's mon-pa ownership, there's all these different things, and you got to figure one out that you can get to. And then districts are also important. And then we have a bunch of resources. They're on your flash drive. We've linked you into all of these things. So you've got hot links on your flash drive. You can just go in, and some of these things are described a little bit better there. But we do have a communications toolkit. We've been using that. We do have some databases and case studies, and we have a number of different kinds of buildings. There are fire stations. There's law enforcement stuff. There's a lot of things that are in there. And then importantly, we're going to do an early adopters workshop for local government in San Diego. I don't know if we're going to be at the Venter Institute, which is a zero net energy building. They don't normally rent it out, I guess, but they were going to be kind enough to let us use it, but it's taken a little longer than we hoped. So this is going to be in October, so the date's not there. What this will be is like a half-day workshop on telling you how you can go about getting ready to do. How can you plan for a zero net energy building? What's in it in terms of who you want to hire? What are your sources of economics? What are the technical assistance you can get? How can you get organized to go ahead and do this? We've been doing this with the state here in execution of the governor's orders for state buildings. We're doing some special workshops, one for local government, one for schools, that are coming up this fall. So I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And while Neil and Jared are coming up, does anybody have a quick clarifying question or anything for Dave? Or?
I come from a design background, and I have worked in an architecture firm. And the one big issue was window glazing and the design aesthetics.
Yeah.
And how do you counteract we like the aesthetic with the architect, designer versus zero net energy buildings and just the aesthetics in general. It can be any type of building material.
It's a good question, and I think some of what you're talking about are some of these really more high-profile types of buildings. But we're seeing buildings you would think would be a high profile that don't take that same pathway. So not all architects are going to go this way because their undergrad degree was in sculpture, right? And then they became an architect. So if they had an undergrad degree in environmental something or other, and then they became an architect, then we're in good shape. So, different schools of architecture teach different things, at Berkeley, for example, and actually you have several art schools of architecture in the state here that are really aligned with sustainability and energy efficient goals. So I think you've got a good resource. It's a change, and it's a change that's going to have to come sometimes. But even like the new Exploratorium, I mean, that's going to be a ZNE. So, you've got big, high-profile buildings like that where the design team's saying, here's a top priority for us. Here's how it's going to go.
Great. Thank you, Dave. And thanks for your question. So moving right along to Neil DeSnoo and Jared Lee.
So this is going to be a two-part presentation about a particular building in Berkeley. It's our library, the West Berkeley Library, which just went online in November of 2013. Oh, I got the slide clicker. Good. No, I didn't do that right, did I? This is yours?
No, it's
yeah, okay, all right. So a little bit about the Berkeley Library. It's one of several branches. We've got a major circulation in Berkeley, and there's a lot of interest in this. And we went through, and we've got a fairly large budget for the libraries. It's $220,000 annually. It's out of a $14 million budget, but the energy is substantial, and it's something that needs to be controlled and managed so that we can provide better services. So the policy drivers behind this are a climate action plan, which has goals for 33% reduction in carbon emissions from city facilities by 2020, and LEED Silver for all new construction and renovation in the municipal sector. That's not such a high goal, but it was something that got us started. And then the driver for this project was that there's a $26 million bond issued for seismic improvements and ADA improvements, and we use that to make a zero net energy building. So in answer to the question, what do you have to do to get one of these? You have to ask, right? And we asked indirectly through our policy drivers, and I think we would have done it differently if we had known what was possible. We would have asked for a design alternate that would include zero net energy. As it is, we didn't, but we referred to our city policies in the solicitation. And the response, the best response that we got came from a team that proposed a zero net energy building. And I'm going to be fairly short in my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Jared so he can talk to you about how that building functions. But I wanted to let you know about how we procured it. The design effort was fueled in part by Savings by Design, the statewide utility-funded program, and they covered basically the design increment of the design cost for this. And this was essential because the capital cost didn't turn out to be that much. The design cost turned out to be the major increment, and that funded a lot of the upfront architectural work, and which was essential to making sure that they could actually bid this project and complete it. So it was all modeled by PG&E, and PG&E helped the design team come up with this plan. The metrics on this project: $7.5 million total budget. Again, the incremental cost, about $60,000, was covered by PG&E Savings by Design. We estimate about a $250,000 incremental cost for the capital, but the building came in under budget, and in part we think that might be due to the fact that it had less mechanical systems in it. And we thought of different options for funding it. We thought about a CEC loan. We considered dropping solar, but when it came in under budget, we went ahead with it, obviously, anyway. I want to spend a little bit of time, or most of my time, on this slide, because this is the actual building performance on intervals, 15-minute intervals, average 15-minute intervals from January to May. And what you'll see is really obvious. We have a base load running. We're not quite sure what all of that is. We'll get into that. But you see when that when the sun comes up, we are generating. And we generate in the first 5 months of the year, we generated a little bit more than we used. So it's performing pretty well so far. We started hitting zero net energy in March. January, February, we were a little over, but as of March, we started going under the wire. So Dave talked about the importance of operations in this, and this next slide will show, yeah, operations are important. This is a brand new building. This is PG&E's meter. This is the sum of the 4 panel meters that we have. That gap looks rather small, but when you add this gap to this gap, it becomes really big. Basically, the building is, the difference between the 2 meters is basically double, right? So we've got to close that gap. The other thing that we find here is that we have a fairly large base load according to PG&E's meter. So we've got to find that. And right now, since our panel meters aren't working well, we've got to find, we've got to calibrate those and then find out what that phantom load is. So we're pleased with the way it's operating. We're hitting zero net from here. We know we've got some more work to do to calibrate it and tune it up and make sure that it continues to operate at this level or better. And a couple things I just want to close with before I turn it over to Jared. Policy drivers were important. We relied too heavily on the favorable bid. I would have liked to include zero net in the document, in the solicitation the next time. Policies that would help that are life cycle cost requirements for solicitations, leveraging O&M savings into the capital budget. These are basic things that are fairly hard to do in local governments, but we need to figure out how to do it. And also mitigation offsets for expansion. So if we do expand facilities in the future, this wasn't an expansion, it was a small expansion, but if we do expand city facilities, we need to say, hey, we got to offset any of those expansions in that site with some improvements elsewhere or on that site. And that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Jared.
Thank you. I'm Jared. I'm the project architect in this project. And to somebody's point there about architects going to sculptural school, I went to Cal Poly, so yeah, so all my undergraduate years were all about straw bale and climate responsive design. So this project speaks a lot to my career. It's a great project. So give you an idea, if you've never been to Berkeley before, it's right here on University Avenue. That's a major thoroughfare with lots of trucks, lots of heavy traffic. So something to bear in mind. We have the bay all the way down here. So that's great because we get some breezes, right, coming from the bay over the building. The buildings here, University Avenue, that's an adjacent 4-story building. And we designed this building with that in mind. So if you were walking down the street where the existing library was and you walked by and didn't realize there was a library there, you'd be forgiven because very few people knew there was a library there. Okay, even the people who live in the neighborhood. I'm joking. So one of the things that's really important is to understand your energy budget and to know how much power you can generate on site. So we did a lot of energy modeling in this project, and it's really, really important. If you're going to go for a zero net energy building, you have to do that. The energy modeling is critical, as well as your climate analysis of the site. You really got to know what the weather, what the sun, what the wind, what the terrain is going to do for you out on that site. Okay. So with that, one of the things that we had to do is understanding that there's a 4-story building next to us and there's a strip mall to the west. They could build a 4-story building next to us in the future, right? Anything happen. So we know in that zone area that the max height is going to be around 4 stories. So what we did was we did various studies to test different roof heights, and we settled on 24 feet, which would minimize any kind of shadowing on our PV, because PV was going to be what we were going to generate power on. So with that, when we first designed the building, that was our energy budget, 17.4 kBTU square feet a year. Okay, as the design progressed, and PV technology started to improve, that started to increase. And by the time we bid the project, we were looking at 435 watts for the same price, right? So for the same effect, for 40 panels less, we now had 36.1 kBTUs per square foot per year. That's double what we initially planned for. And we're not even counting solar thermal yet. Climate analysis. right? That's the wind rows. That shows you where the majority of your wind is coming from, okay? Psychromatic charts, that gives you strategies that you can use for incorporating passive design into your building. This is a comfort chart that shows you where the comfort zone is based on the temperatures, the median temperatures throughout the year in Berkeley, right? And then we did a lot of daylight analysis because daylighting is going to play a very important part in this building. So one other things that we did, and which I encourage everyone to do, is to look at your loads, right? And these are your plug loads right here, okay? Now, the building, you can somewhat control. The plug loads, computers, printers, that's cultural. That's how people work. If you can redefine the way people work in the building, you can substantially reduce, a significant amount of energy that your building is going to use. Daylighting analysis, right? We ran through, look at the amount of light that's going through here. I'm going to have a lot of photos later on that you see the quality of light in the building. If you can daylight your building, you can cut down on the amount of lights you have on throughout the day. Here we are, lots of sun out there, and we have lights on here. Given it's a different kind of building. Okay, daylights and views, because we rely a lot on daylighting. What you're going to see here is that all these spaces in blue means you have views out to the exterior. We have windows on almost every portion of the building and skylights. Okay, CFD, computational fluid dynamics. If you're going to do a passive design building like this, you're going to need to know how the wind is going to work with your building. So when I talked to you about how we had a lot of traffic on University Avenue, right, that's a lot of noise, that's a lot of dust. At the same time, the wind that we want, the cooling winds of the bay, is blowing from that direction. So one of the things that we came up with was a strategy of where instead of having windows on University Avenue, we created a wind chimney that would be back away from University Avenue. So what happens is when the wind blows over the building, it creates a negative zone here, and that pulls out any warm air in the building out through the building, and that's replaced by cool air coming in from the northern part of the building. It comes right through the space. Now, one of the things that we did, and we did this during construction, was we carried out some comfort verification studies because the client needed to feel comfortable with the idea. And what you're going to find is when you go through the process, a lot of times, when people buy in at the very beginning, they may change their minds because it's still fairly new. Okay, it can be very scary. Okay, so we ran a number of comfort verification studies to show that what we had designed in all the spaces, literally almost all the spaces, that it would work. And that's a diagram that shows how natural ventilation works through the building, and I have some and how it comes out through the wind chimney here. And these are the 4 different modes that we have. So in the heating season, right, we have radiant flow heating here. That's working off our solar thermal. We have 3 very small package units on the roof that generate supplemental heat, okay, when there's overcast sky. So those are all electric. There is no gas in this building, none. So it's GHG, greenhouse gas free, right? In the early cooling season, when we go into spring, what happens with the chimney is that winds are blowing away here. The windows here open up. We get some, breezes coming through the building. Well, the cool air coming through. It's not a breeze. You won't actually feel a breeze coming through here. And it vents out this way. When it gets warmer, the skylights open up and the hot air goes out. Everything is tied to the building management system. Okay? When it gets warmer still, we have fans. I don't have photos of it, but we have big-ass fans. Okay? And so they come out and they vent through the building also. And the fan creates, air movement, and that adds to your comfort. And then when it gets really warm, the windows shut, okay? And then those 3 heat pumps we have on the roof, they generate supplementary cooling through the radiant slab, okay? And we can still vent. Now, the one thing about the heating season is that when all the windows are closed and we're using radiant flow heating, well, you need fresh air, right? So the windows will open when we have sensors all throughout the building. When they detect higher levels of carbon dioxide, the windows will open. You get cold air coming in, but we actually have radiators on the windows to preheat the air, so you don't get this blast of cold air falling down you. That's where all the comfort verification studies came in. Okay, this is a three-dimensional drawing that shows how the air comes through the building. We have rantals at the windows, radiant slab, FSC wood in the building. The building's all wood frame, anyways. Rain screen in the front of the building, and we can get into that as we go forward. So this is our energy model that we created. The AIA 2030 reporting tool says for libraries throughout the nation, the energy utilization rate is 104K BTUs per square foot a year. Our target was 17.4. We have to use Energy Pro to model our energy because Title 24 in the state of California. Well, if you guys have played around with Energy Pro, it doesn't understand radiant slabs, and it sure as heck doesn't understand passive ventilation. Okay, so it thinks our building's at 25. In reality, back in May, we were at 7.64. We're actually now in this region because we're positive. Okay, floor plan of the building. If you guys want to come on a tour of the building, just give me a call, and I can arrange some tours. Okay, so three-dimensional image of the building. Okay, this is what some of you guys probably be more interested in. Do you know how many public buildings there are? Verified zero net energy buildings there are in the state of California. We have 10 verified zero net energy buildings, and this is from New Building Institute, their information. In the state of California, there are 0 public buildings. So even though we have the governor's mandate out there for 2025 for state-owned buildings, even though we have the 2030 goal, we have 0 public buildings. So once we are verified in about 6 months or so, we'll probably be the first public zero net energy building in the state of California. So how many contractors are going to have experience with ZNE? 0. So when the contractor bid on the project, and it was West Bay, they bid low, right? On public projects, you're going to get that. They had no clue they're going to be building a zero net energy building, and I realized that when I got in. Okay, so I got to go through this really fast. I have a minute. So you got to work with them really, really well. The building's really complex. Everything has to be figured out from the very beginning. Now I'll tell you one thing: we turn around RFIs and submittals in 3 to 5 days, way faster than usual, because we needed to help them. Wood frame. Okay, this is the heart of the system. This is the heart of the building. These are renewables. Okay. And when you deal with PV, you got to remember it's design build, right? You have to define the design criteria, but they're going to want to come down there and plunk down whatever they want up there. If you don't tell them how to do it, they're going to drop whatever they can on your roof, and it may not be the way you want it to perform. Solar thermal, everything's up on stanchions. This way you can re-roof the roof in the future and not worry about the technology. Okay, radiant slabs. I'm going to go through this really, really, really fast. This is our natural ventilation. That's the wind chimney that you see there. That's when it's almost finished. And that's how the air flows through the windows on the north. This is all operable. And you can see the rental, the radiators on the windows. Same here. This is staff workroom. And then daylight. Even when the building is under construction, the quality of light in the space is really nice. I call this a chapel. It's actually a teen room. Okay. Rain screen system, I'll be done really, really fast. One of the things that we did with this was we helped the contractor a lot by we changed all our details. We changed our details in a way that we reduced the amount of head furring on the building by 30%. So, it's a two-way street. We use rock wool in the walls, so we actually have R30 in the walls using rock wool and R41 in the roofs. So we got extremely tight envelope. And the rain screen helps. That's a picture from above. And I'm going to, can I go through this real quick? Because these are numbers that you guys want to see. Zero net energy building, what we did was a cost comparison. They did 4 libraries in the city of Berkeley. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm looking at this one done in Gilroy, which we did. It's 52,600 square foot building. So you get a lot of efficiencies when you have a big building like that. So construction cost, $365, right? So our building, right, 9,400 thereabouts. Estimate 7.5. The bid was 5.5, right? Final construction cost was 5.56. That was 1.3% in change orders approved, final approved. Okay. Construction cost $592.30. Now look at the other libraries. These two are renovations, so they're going to run about the same because renovations tend to be more expensive. South Branch, okay, $8,700, just a little bit smaller than us. Their cost $574 a square foot. If you're talking about premium, that's only an $18 premium, right? On a 9,400 square foot building, it's minimal. It really is. Now look at Santa Monica Pico Branch. Not to pick on them, obviously, because there's reasons for it. They're going for platinum, right? We're actually on track for platinum. 7.27 construction costs. Actually, that's not quite final yet. I need to get those numbers. But construction cost was $837.52. Okay, so when people say there's a premium on zero net energy, I say, show me the money. Right? Almost similar slides. You can see how the building's been performing. It's doing really, really well. If you go to this link, you can see an energy dashboard every day. And I'm on it every day just to see how the building is performing. It's sort of my hobby. Photos. And like I say, if you want a tour, get the card from me. I actually have handouts for this. If you want a handout, a one-page handout description of the building, when I'm done, I'll hand it out. And feel free to contact me for a tour. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Jared and Neil. Fantastic. I think we're just going to move right along in the interest of time to hearing from Chip. And we will hopefully have plenty of chance for to have general questions at the end there. So let's get that up. And
So how many of you have been to a timeshare presentation? Okay, so at some point, you know that there's going to be a guy like me, nice suit, nice tie, come in, and he's going to want you to sign the contract and open your wallet. That's exactly what I'm going to do, bat and clean up for Z&E today for all of you, okay? Because Dave needs 10 more buildings in his report next year. You municipal folks have got to do it, all right? So I want to challenge you. 3 things. First of all, you got to think creatively about this stuff. You can't do the old same old box, same old routine. We just heard about this, about a very creative building. You got to look for possibilities. You got to think outside the box. And the third thing you got to do is take action. Action changes things. I think we can all agree with that. But one of the things you got to ask yourself, okay, Chip, if I got to take action, why the hell am I here? What's the point of me being here? So let me hypothecate, here's the reason we're here. And for those of you that have never seen this photo, this is NASA's most famous photo. It's called Earthrise. It was taken by the astronauts of Apollo 11 that were doing the dry run for the Apollo moon landing about another 7 months after this was done. And these astronauts came around the limb of the moon for the 4th time, and this popped up in the window of the LEM, and Jim Lovell and Bill Anders took this picture, all by happen chance, okay? Now, Jim Lovell says that this is the grand oasis in the vastness of space. If you want a reason why we're here, that's it right there. And 2 years later, in April 1970, is when Earth Day started, and I'll hypothecate to you that the motivation and the inspiration for Earth Day is this picture right here. And this is why we are all here today, is to do zero net energy buildings to keep that looking like it is today. But I'm here to talk about one of the very first Z&E projects in San Diego that I was personally involved with, that for you on the municipal side that are going to do existing buildings probably, because as Dave mentioned here earlier, 25% of the buildings that are Z&E are existing buildings. And this is an existing building that an architectural firm called Hanna, Gaber & Wells bought in Ocean Beach. And you can see what it looked like. It was an old gas station and an old service center to get cars repaired in Ocean Beach, about a block and a half from the beach. This is what it looks like today. Turned into, as my dad says, you turn a silk purse into a Salzier. And that's about 5,000 square feet. It's got natural ventilation. It's got a mini split heat system in it that was put in just a year ago, because up to that point, this building's been installed. This has been up since 2010. The architectural firm, there's only about 10 employees here, made the commitment that they were going to go through the wintertime without heat. And there was a lot of people that had coats and sweaters on when you walked in there, but they made the commitment to do that. There's a lot of extensive daylighting, and there's about a 17 kW PV array on the roof that I'll go through here and tell you a little bit about. But when we talk about Z&E buildings, I think this slide really says it all, because it is truly a balancing act. You know, Z&E has now become the holy grail of design. LEED Platinum has been the bogey. Now Z&E is the bogey. But if you look at this, I think this picture represents exactly how challenging this is. Because at the bottom, we've got the statewide strategic plan that Kathy talked about. Here's the reason we're doing all this. You've got the public policy makers that have encouraged us as the utilities to get involved with our resources to help encourage you to make it happen. We've got the professional design community that's really trying to step up and do these types of things, if you just heard. And then on top, you've got the market acceptance of this whole concept from a cost standpoint, from a real estate standpoint. Is my building going to be worth more? And you can see that all this has to work perfectly for all this to come out. And I think this is one of the reasons we're all here, is to educate people about this and to show you that, yeah, it is difficult, but it's not impossible. And as you can see, somebody got pretty creative and made that work. So some of the challenges in the Z&E building that we talked about in San Diego and we've heard already. One of the biggest things we talked about Energy Pro. It doesn't model natural ventilation. And if you got a building at the beach, wouldn't you want to take advantage of that? Which they did. And one of the challenges we had as we were providing the resources is that how are you going to model natural ventilation in Energy Pro and put it in an Energy Pro model, take credit for it from an energy savings perspective? And so what we did is we hired one of the best guys in the country up at UCSD here in San Diego to do a computational dynamic flow diagram for us, and he wrote a paper that we based a lot of our assumption on the savings that this particular building could get. And you can see down here, it's hard to see, but there's operable windows here. We got windows up here, and it just creates a natural heat effect or a natural stack effect that this, on a very day like today, there isn't a light on in this building. All the windows are open, and all the skylights are open, creating a very, very nice work environment in here. But we talked about budgets. That was the big thing with the owners. And so we brought a lot of resources into this project to try and help them to overcome some of these offset incremental costs that we've talked about. They had the issue, are they going to heat the building or they won't? They decided not to originally, and like I say, just a year ago, we put these mini splits in. We did an extensive daylighting analysis and modeling. And was there enough PV on the roof to really make the building in Z&E? That was one of the keys, is because it's a fairly small footprint at only 5,000 square feet and not a lot of roof space, which I'll show you. And here's a kind of a bigger diagram of that. So we got a lot of the daylighting that's coming in through here for them. We've got daylighting here. These are all Super T8 lights. I've got a picture I'll show you here. But this was all some of the challenges. And trying to make all this work as a balancing act, and again and again and again. And we've heard about one of the keys here. This is the inside, and you can see here's all the principals here, here's all the guys. There's only 10 or 11 people here. This is a fairly small office. You can see the diagram here on the right-hand side. Oops. But it's a very small building, but it took a lot of coordination to make this happen, even with a professional design team. And this was the first one they did. They made a commitment. They're an award-winning architectural firm here in town. So if anybody here is from City of San Diego looking to build a Z&E building, I highly recommend you hire these guys, okay? They did our Energy Innovation Center. They did the first Z&E building. Really, really great guys to work with. We talked about this earlier. Energy modeling is the absolute key, because you're going to do it again and again and again and again. As you swap out things in the building, you took the orientation, you take a look at the different things, it's the key part of making sure that your assumptions are going to be correct. And that was one thing that we stepped up and did from a utility standpoint, is provided all the modeling, all the services, because they didn't have the resources to be able to pay for all that. And so we really got heavily involved in that with some of our expertise. They wanted to make sure that employee comfort was important. They had budget issues that we've talked about. They went after LEED Platinum, which they got. And they also wanted to put some solar hot water, but there really wasn't enough roof space. So there wasn't enough room at the end, as I'd like to talk about, to be able to make it work. And you can see over here to the left, that's the roof up here. There's the lights, skylights. Those open up when the windows open up. There's all the PV. up there at 17 PV. Here's the front with the operable windows. That all opens up. There's a big, beautiful door here that's on a big, huge hinge that opens up. It's pretty cool. So it's a very, very unique project. Now, this is kind of just in a quick summary of the Bacon Street offices as to really what has happened. And we've gone out and done a measurement evaluation study that we just completed about 4 or 5 months ago. And this building is overproducing. We thought it was going to underproduce. It's overproducing by almost 20%, which was kind of interesting because we really this was kind of the first shotgun out of the box as far as a design standpoint. We didn't know where they were going to make the bogey. And now they're overproducing by 20% on a month-to-month basis, year in and year out. And this has been up since 2010. The KPDUs per square foot, 9.9. I think Dave mentioned the average is 20 or 25 for Z&E buildings, right, Dave?
Averaging, yeah, right around 20.
Yeah, and we got one here at 9.9. It's actually performing at 9.9, verified savings. So this is a very, very unique building, and for the very first one, we did a lot of work here to make this work. So one of the things that we've talked about, I saw the presentation from the Berkeley, is what do the utilities bring to the table? How can we help you with some of the resources that we have? Because after all, that's what, when the CPUC sets the goal for this, how can we help you make that happen? And so there's an extensive design assist that we worked on this project and others that have come through that want to go really low Z&E buildings or very energy efficient buildings. We can help do some of the modeling. We can help you with the resources. There's a lot of things that we can do. We talked about the incentives that Savings by Design has to offset those incremental costs. We can help pay for natural ventilation studies because that's going to be a key part of almost every building, particularly here in San Diego and up in the Bay Area. And daylighting resources. That was one of the biggest things that we had to do was from a daylight standpoint. I think we reran those models probably 10 or 15 times with that Super T8 lighting system to make sure that the sensors worked so that the lights weren't on in the middle of the day. Because Dave's been in this building, and when I took him there, it was an overcast, cloudy day, and it was perfectly fine. There was probably 45, 50-foot candles that light at every desk. Didn't even need a light on. So, but as you know, that's a challenge, is that sometimes lighting controls don't always talk to the ballasts and the lights as the way they should. So Savings by Design, this is a statewide website. Whatever you are in the state, for you municipal folks, I heard you from all over, you can go to savingsbydesign.com and you can pull up all the utilities that have this program across the state. You can see the different people. Here's the contact for San Diego. But every utility has a contact listed there. So if you have a question about the program or want to get involved, this is how you do it. And I can highly recommend to you that's the very first step. After you have hired a design firm, call us, okay? Because we definitely want to get involved. So I think in conclusion, I think what I'd really like to encourage you is, I like this saying by Walt Disney, it's kind of fun to do the impossible. So why not? Why not? Why not be like the mouse here trying to get the cheese out of the trap here? Why? Because it's important for us. It's important for you as municipalities, your kids' kids, to keep Mother Earth looking like it was. So thanks very much for your attention. I appreciate it. And the Cabernet and the Chardonnay is in the back, and you can start opening your checkbooks, okay? Thank you.
To invite the Chip and Neil and Jared and Dave up to the front. I think we've got another whole 15 minutes to go for questions. So with that, I see someone with a burning question. If you could state your name and there you go.
Hi, Rick Brown, Terra Verde. Chip, I appreciate that this was an early project, but you sort of jumped over this issue of the PV being oversized. And one of the problems that I think we have perception-wise is that with Z&E is that it doesn't quite fit with always the sort of net metering world. When you oversize a system, as you know, you're throwing money down the toilet, and I know from working with the public sector, heads roll when that happens. So it really is important. I'm sure this was a great design firm for all kinds of reasons, but to oversize a system that large means somebody wasn't paying attention. That you never should see a system oversized by 20%. And so I just think it's really important when we're aiming towards Z&E, we don't forget that there is an underlying economics that has to be paid attention to. and oversizing solar is one of the worst ways to waste money. So I just want to, I'm interested in what, after analysis you all did around why was it oversized to such a large degree, because that really is a high number.
Well, that's a good question. It's a very good point, too. I mean, you make excellent points, particularly in regards to net metering. I don't know that I could really give you a definitive answer as to why it's oversized, because some of the people on the professional design team that were involved with the project are no longer here practicing in San Diego. We at SDG&E were very much a part of the process, so I really can't tell you how the 17 kW was picked to put up there, other than the fact that we occupied almost every square inch of roof up there, as you can tell. And so it may have been as simple as that. Let's just throw it up here and see what happens. It's hard to say. They don't own that PV system, by the way. That's a PPA that they. It's a good deal for the PPA. It's a good deal for the PPA and the investors, absolutely. But had they owned the PV system, and if we were doing that same project today and they were going to own it, yeah, there would be a lot more rigor instead of trying to take a shotgun approach to really adequately right-size that PV, which I think a lot of projects now are doing. DPR did it because they were the next one here in San Diego with their offices in University City. I know the J. Vintner Institute, which is the biotech, that was resized, I think, like 7 ways but Sunday to make sure it wasn't oversized. So you make a very good point. This one here, unfortunately, was the first one out of the box, and I think it was kind of like, that looks good. That's kind of my speculation.
Great. Who's got a question? A couple in the front here. We'll go to this woman.
Hi, Susan with the County of San Diego. Regarding your modeling assistance, we are trying to do, looking to 2030, an assessment of all of our buildings that are over 5,000 square feet, 6.5 million square feet, all told. We're not going to do anything about it immediately. We've got 16 years to get it done. But unless we do that assessment, we don't know whether we want to invest in those buildings. So we can get energy audits through SDG&E. The modeling part is an issue. How can you help us with that?
Well, that's a good point. I think I see Amanda sitting behind you, and I know that she has asked me to sit down in a meeting with you guys, I think, next week to talk about this. So we're going to see what kind of resources we can bring to the table to help you with that. And it may be maybe not the whole shimoli, but we might be able to do maybe 5% of those buildings and see what we can do from a modeling standpoint to help you out. But I know that we've got a meeting set up next week, and we'll talk about it then and see what we can do. Okay?
I'm Jim with the City of Santa Barbara, and my question is to Gerard. And first of all, I'd like to compliment you, especially for the cost that you built that building for. That was really pretty remarkable. It's a little bit of a technical question, though, regarding I can see how the radiant heating can work, but the radiant cooling, how do you keep the floor from condensing?
Okay, that's actually a pretty good question. We are using the same system, right? The supplementary system, the 3 heat pumps on the roof. Now, one of the things is because, when we are using, it was a concern, right? When you use radiant cooling, is that there's a possibility that you're going to get condensation. Now, if your humidity levels, right, rise up in the winter, and then in the summer, and then you're using supplementary cooling in radiance, whether or not it's you're using a radiant panel in the wall or on the floor or on the ceiling, there's always the danger of condensation. Now, with our system, the natural ventilation that's coming through the building, for the most part, even though we are close to the bay, one of the things that we found was we didn't really have very high humidity levels within the building. So when we did our calculations, and one of the things that we did was we did not overcool the slab. Okay, it's really, really important that when you do the energy model, that you realize that the tendency with cooling, if you're using like regular HVAC systems, it's like 80 degrees outside. Everyone cranks it down to 60, and everyone's wearing sweaters in the building. That's not really helping you. When you're working with a system like this, when you're working with radiant flow, so you got to keep the temperatures so that people feel comfortable. So it's all about comfort, but at the same time saving energy. If you don't crank it all the way up and you get something super cool, you're not going to get the condensation. So I believe one of the things that we did was we are keeping the temperature of the slab around like 75 degrees. So, and then if the temperature continues to go up, we bring up the temperature, because human comfort, right? It's in the head. Seriously, it really is. And people, the perception of comfort, it can adjust when you slowly adjust temperatures. You do it, and with the radiant flow, that's the good thing about radiant flow, is that it slowly adjusts, and your body temperature adjusts with it. Now, if we were using forced air, whatever, and when we crank it, your body feels that cold all of a sudden, and then you feel uncomfortable. So that's one differences that we find between radiant and forced air. And over the years, we understand. I mean, there was condensation problems with people using radiant flows, but that was the whole issue. People were cranking it up really high.
Great. And here's a question in the back.
One question, building on the gentleman's comment about public sector overproduction of PV. From the Z&E stakeholder perspective, what do you think would be the best outcome from an AB 327, from the PUC's AB 327 proceeding that is modifying net energy metering from 1-for-1 to whatever we come up with that is a wholesale to retail uplift?
You want to take it, Dave?
And I'm a consultant to the CPUC, so I'll be general and succinct. No, I think I don't know if there's a best solution. I think you really need to look at, and there's an excellent report by the Regulatory Assistance Project on this, that how you need to look at this issue, because in reality, you can get the advocates for solar and the utilities can be pretty far apart, because the advocates for solar say, hey, we're producing when your system needs the power, and the utilities going, hey, we got this grid here, guys, and this grid is a huge part of our sunk costs in our system here. So you've got to work these things out, and you've really, I think, got to just do a really thorough job of trying to get to the reality of the issue of how to resolve this thing. I think net energy metering, it was designed to stimulate solar, and all you can say right now is, hey, solar stimulated, and it is time for some kind of a change, and that change is going to have to figure out, all this, what's the value of the production, what's the value of this stuff being on site rather than having long transmission, what's the cost of the grid, how do these all economics work? It's complicated. So that'll be my answer.
So Z&E could go by the wayside if AB 327 isn't advantageous for distributed generation.
There's, I've seen a lot of
Unless you have really deep pockets.
I've seen a lot of creative things done. So I know of a trade, like a junior college or trade school, I forget which, in Massachusetts, where when that thing's overproducing in the summertime, they just send it to other buildings on the campus. So that's getting full retail rate benefit because the power is being used. So I think there's ways to solve that problem. I know this problem is sort of a much larger problem than Z&E buildings, but Z&E buildings are kind of the poster child. If you have a 300,000 square foot building and it's not using any net kilowatt hours from the utility, that gets everybody's attention. So we, as it gets played out for really, frankly, residential retrofits, it's going to play that same way for Z&E. That doesn't mean that that's the end of the creative solutions to it, though.
Hi, so I have a question. It's a little bit more about market conversion. You guys give tours of these different buildings. Do you have a sense of the kinds of people that come through and take the tours, and whether or not that's really how it's adding or spurring zero net energy construction? In other words, are you seeing contractors coming through, people headed that direction, or architects, or what are you seeing?
Considering I just offered to give you guys a tour, I was Chip and I were at the Z&E Early Adopters workshop organized by NBI in Sacramento last month, and Kathy was there too. So out of that, a number of agencies have contacted me. So DGS, I have a tour scheduled with them. SMUD wanted to come down. even though they have a new $78 million ZNE building, but they wanted to see what the differences are, because our building uses passive technology as opposed to theirs, which are all very, very active systems. When you have a building that big, you're using very different systems. I've had Cal Lottery come by. I've had some different municipalities, come by on tours. A number of people have, like East Bay Environmental Network, have asked for presentations. The Joint Silicon Valley Task Force for Climate Change. So we're getting a wide variety of people, not just public, but we're also getting some private sector. I have a lunch scheduled with a tour for like Genentech that's going to be in July. So people are aware that we have done the zero net energy building, and so they're very interested. The main reason why Genentech is also approaching us is because we have a science and technology background, as well as higher ed and healthcare. So they are looking at what can be done to help them reduce energy on the campus. We already did one project for them where we reduced the energy consumption by 30%. It was a very simple project. It paid for itself in less than 6 months, and it saves them $116,000 in energy costs a year, and that was just simply tying their exhaust fans into the building management system with an anemometer. So if it detects the speed of wind, it winds down the exhaust fans, and then when the winds die down, it speeds it up again instead of keeping it a full bore all throughout the year. So the knowledge that we have as a firm for high performance buildings, there's a lot of interest in it. So that's who we're seeing as people coming for tours.
Great. We're going to take one more question in the back here, and I'll just mention that I spoke with Kim earlier today, and he reports that the city of Atherton is thinking about doing its new city hall as a ZNE building. So exciting. Last question here.
What's involved in getting a building certified as ZNE?
There's going to be two methodologies on this in California, so I'll start with that. If I go with the current methodology, it's sort of as I described. People are going back and looking at a building more than a year after it's been built. The only people that are really doing that now are the International Living Futures Institute, and we work with them. We're going to work out some sort of a deal because we've been asked by public agencies, will NBI just do this? So that's the only one that's active right now. And given their costs that they've published, we're probably just going to work with them because it's relatively low cost. We anticipate that USGBC will move in this direction. I said 2 years 1 year ago. I'll still say 2 years this year, and I might say 2 years next year. It's hard to say. But they will do something too, because a lot of people go for LEED and zero net energy, and that's the big brand. And so the big brand needs to do this. We've worked pretty closely with them over the years. There's a number of reasons why they take their time. One thing is for that other people to develop the methodologies first, and then they simply adopt it. And they're not shy about saying that. The other thing that's going to happen in California is ZNE is determined by code. And so, what California has done with code, and they've indicated that this is their track for the future, is to look at time-dependent valuation, which would have, in commercial buildings, my understanding is that would reduce maybe the size of your PV array by about 30%, something like that, because you are generating power at the high value year. And so there will be a determination, probably, unless things change in California, but that's the approved track at this point in time, that's going to happen. And so there you will be able to say, I have a building that meets California's ZNE standards. It may not meet what the Living Building Institute cares, and you may not care that it doesn't meet that standard.
Yeah. Anybody else? Great. Thank you. Please join me in thanking our panelists for a really great panel. Thanks so much.